I don't want to glaze over
Yeah.
the conversion therapy. We
Okay.
have to go back to
Yeah.
that. I feel like now in today's society, it's being talked about more
Mm-hmm.
as versus back when you were going through it. I'm sure it
Yeah.
was very hush hush. And one of those
Yes.
things, if you did know someone who experienced it or went through it, you're not allowed to talk about it. It's
Mm-hmm.
one of those things we just don't talk about. So my question is, what did conversion therapy look like for you?
Whew.
And what were your thoughts going through it as such a young individual? How
Mhm.
old were you?
I started conversion therapy around the age of
So
9.
at 9 years old, what does that look like and what is going through your mind as you're going through this therapy?
Yeah. So I think around that age of 8 or 9, I really had began to kind of like formulate being queer without the label, but kind of had just was just like, okay, like there's a label for this. Um, and I remember very early on when the idea of conversion therapy was was kind of introduced. I really didn't have any time to think
Mm.
because I never really had any autonomy or agency, if that makes sense. You know, here I am, uh, a young child that is part of a ministry family of a very conservative church. And I, f- I feel like a lot of a lot of kind of moves that happened were very strategic, not because of a anything person centered, but because of reputation, if that makes sense. You know, I remember my my biological father stating how big image and reputation is, you know, for the family, and how, you know, like we in some ways, like we were a first family, right? Like we were a first family. And so con- I think when conversion therapy was brought on, it was more of a crisis aversion, if
Mm.
that makes sense. It was kind of a way for it to be like, okay, we're handling this, right? And so there wasn't a choice. I didn't have a choice. I was told, um, you need help. We're gonna get you help, and yeah, it that's how it happened. The what it looked like, initially it started off very, I would say, mild. So it was, um, we'll just pray over him. You know, for folks to know about the oil,
Mm-hmm.
bring out the oil and having prayer circles. And then the prayer circles got longer, and in my experience, more physical and more violent.
When you say physical and violent,
Like shoving and pushing and slapping, and almost like an exorcism, if that makes sense, right? Um, and I'm trying to, as a child at that time, you're scared.
of course.
You're very scared. You are mentally and physically dealing with trauma you've never experienced before. And so I think in the beginning, I wanted to please so many people. I wanted to please my parents. I wanted to please my family. I wanted to please my church. And I took it. I took it. And it didn't change. And when it didn't change, then it was like, oh, we need to crank this up a notch. And so I remember I'm sorry.
You're fine. Take your time.
I remember being taken to a camp. And I remember being deprived food. I remember being locked in what we would call like the cellar. And it's dark. And the only thing there is a mattress. And just being just left there until I comply. I remember being beat and whipped to the point, I remember distinctly one time I had gotten beat so badly that I couldn't go to school because there was such bruising. And I think also like what kind of for me was the straw that kind of broke everything is I remember being forced into trying to be straight.
In what way?
In ways I shouldn't have been introduced. I'll put it like that. And so it was a really dark time. It was a really dark time for me. I think I was just a shell of myself during that time. Just a shell. Highly suicidal. Highly suicidal. I remember going, and this is where it gets, for me, I think a little bit even more messier. I remember being in school and there was a teacher that I don't know, I felt close to. And I can't remember exactly what I said, but I had kind of, the signs were there that like I was suicidal, I was very much depressed, and I think she asked me something about like, oh, sometimes the world is really dark. I feel just like taking my life. And I said, oh, I understand. Like, I do too. Like, I've gone into the medicine cabinet and just pulled pills and just tried to down them. And so that naturally triggered, stuff. And I remember being told, I remember my siblings being weaponized against me.
Mm.
You don't want your family to be split up. You don't want your sisters to be put into foster care. And these are all the horrible things that they do in foster care. And so I protected them. I protected folks. And all the while I was hurting and dying inside and furious and upset and questioning, why would I want to worship somebody who's allowing this to happen to me? Like, why would I, like, why? It, like, is this the reality of being in this? And so it continued. It started at 9 and continued until right before my freshman year of high school. And I was at a very critical point by then. The suicide attempts became more frequent and more, I would say, elaborate. Because in my mind, I felt like this is the easiest way for everyone to get what they want. I can ease the pain and no one gets blamed. And I remember very distinctly, I was at my biological parents' place, and very frequently anything would trigger some anger, but it was all back to who I was as a queer person. Something had happened that particular day, can't quite remember. And the beating was about to happen. And I'm sorry, I should have prefaced. By that time, I had just kind of like, I was needing an escape because there had been so much that had happened with the conversion therapy, with the beatings. I remember distinctly one time I had got beaten so bad and I was trying to run away from the beating, and I slipped and I hit the corner of like a piece of furniture and I was knocked unconscious. And I was unconscious, and when I came to, I could hear the screams of like, stop beating him. He's out. He's out cold. And so,
because you were still getting beat while you were unconscious.
I was still getting beat while I was unconscious. And so I needed to escape. And so this day, and I always say, I feel like the universe knew and aligned everything up so perfectly for me to escape. Because I feel like if I didn't escape that day, I was going to be dead. And the beating was going to happen. Individual goes to get whatever it was. Sometimes it was a switch. Sometimes it was an extension cord. Who knows? And I didn't even think twice. I I had shoes on. I was fully clothed, because that was another thing. I had to strip down when I would be beaten. Um, and I bolted. And I think from that place to my grandparents' place had to have been about 5 miles. And so I remember bolting out the door and just running and having so much adrenaline. There was, at the end of the street, there was kind of like this big iron fence, to a cemetery. And like, like one of those big iron fences with the spikes on the end.
Mm.
And I ran, and I don't even know how I got over it. I literally just flung my body over the fence, hit the ground, and kept running. Because I knew in my mind, I said, I can't be on the main road, because if I'm on the main road, they're gonna grab me and bring me back. And I ran, and ran to my grandparents' house. And my grandparents, God rest their soul, in their way throughout all of this had tried to, I think, were the earliest versions of allies I have experienced. They tried their best, given the relationship and their proximity, to be an ally. But I ran, and I remember getting there, and my grandmother was there. And I remember saying, I can't go back, Grandma. I can't go back. I can't go back. I can't go back. He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me. He's going to really, really kill me. And I just remember her saying, like, don't worry about it, baby. And she called my grandfather. And my grandfather came and talked. And, long story short, I never left my grandparents' house after that. My granddaddy said over his dead body, would he allow me to go through any more suffering? And the interesting thing about it, my grandparents were ministers. And I think part of that beautiful mess is, for all of the hurt and the heartache and the pain and the abuse and everything that I experienced on the other side, my grandparents were the ones who showed me what true spirituality and true faith is. And at that time, nobody knew what an ally was. There wasn't even a term of an ally. And my grandfather was a very staunch, thus saith the Lord, Bible preacher. But when it came to me, I didn't have to hide who I was. I didn't have to change who I was. There was never this, uncross your legs. Don't talk like that. He loved Daniel for Daniel. And so I always thank the universe for my grandparents, because if it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for my grandparents, I probably would not be here.